Iraq, site of ancient Mesopotamia and the cradle of civilization. In the remains of the ancient city of Nineveh, Sumerian tablets dating back to as early as 1800 BC tell the story of King Gilgamesh. In this epic poem, Gilgamesh has a companion named Enkidu, who is described as a hairy wild man living outside human society.
What is fascinating about the Epic of Gilgamesh is the fact that it relates to us a story of Enkidu, who allegedly was a giant. It is possible that Enkidu, this wild, hairy beast, this giant, could have been of extraterrestrial origin, because that is what the ancient Sumerian texts are saying.
Enkidu is described in the Epic of Gilgamesh as being a hairy, man-like monster with great strength. And when you read that story, and you have to think that Enkidu is some kind of Bigfoot, Sasquatch.
This is the actual first fashioned being by the gods, where they put their genetic marker on it to make a new being that would be their slave, and they called this being the Enkidu.
Is it possible, as ancient astronaut theorists suggest, that the Epic of Gilgamesh actually describes a hominid creature created by extraterrestrial beings? Sumerian texts also describe ancient sky gods who came to Earth, called the Anunnaki.
The ancient astronaut theory explains how these gods were probably extraterrestrials and put their genetic marker on this beast, but that beast would still exist and probably went on its own evolutionary path to be the Bigfoot and the Sasquatch that we have today.
Do ancient accounts of such human-like beasts provide further evidence that this otherworldly being may have really existed throughout our history? Some believe the giant in the Old Testament story of David and Goliath may also be an early representation of Bigfoot.
If you think about the story of David and Goliath from the Bible, Goliath is huge and he's big and he's hairy, but he doesn't live on the edge of civilization or avoid people. He's really being used as a weapon, almost, a weapon of terror against the Israelites.
When you start reading the Bible in more detail and descriptions of these giants, there were various other big creatures in our ancestors' world which we no longer are aware of, and Bigfoot might just be one category which somehow has been able to survive. Whether or not Goliath is a Bigfoot, they definitely sit within the same category of a creature which clearly is not human, but clearly is also present here, and which is taller than our ancestors were.
My question is, what is the truth behind this particular story? And it is possible, as some scholars have suggested, that Goliath might have been an extraterrestrial, that he was a type of giant, a human abomination, a half-alien, half-human creature that was so terrifying, so horrendous, that David took it upon himself to vanquish that beast.
All cultures across the world, whether it's South America, Native American Indians, Europe, Russia, China, Tibet, Australia, all these nations have legends and tales of giant hairy wild men. Now, you know, people say, well, legends are just legends. But when you have cultures and countries separated by oceans, all talking about very similar things, to me, this does suggest that in times past, these things were very, very prevalent and widespread across the world.
For centuries, visitors to the Mediterranean island of Sardinia have been greeted with strange and mysterious stories that a race of giants once lived there thousands of years ago. But other than the presence of hundreds of bizarre monolithic stone structures, there had been little physical evidence after 1953 to convince mainstream archaeologists or even ancient astronaut theorists that the myths about giants ever had a basis in reality. That is, until 1979, when more giant bones were reportedly discovered during one of the island's many archaeological excavations.
I interviewed two individuals who worked on the excavation of the Nuragic ruins in the town of Sadara, underneath the church of Sant Anastasia. Both of these individuals dug up, at different periods of time, multiple skeletons of giants from 9 to 12 feet tall. And then the bones of the giants would go into the church and then disappear overnight. There have been hundreds of excavations in which the bones of giants have been allegedly unearthed and then secreted away.
Before we left the island of Sardinia, Marty and I were supposed to finally get access to an actual giant bone. That was all set. And then we received notifications that the guy pulled out and he was not going to show us the giant bone. Why did he pull out? One could argue that some type of censorship is going on in Sardinia.
Censorship? Is it possible that physical evidence that could help prove that giants once inhabited the island of Sardinia has been deliberately hidden away? But if so, by whom and why? As far as Giorgio and Marty are concerned, that is just one of the many questions still left unanswered by their trip.
Hey, I want to ask you this. Did ancient astronauts visit Sardinia?
I think there is no doubt that extraterrestrials visited Sardinia in ancient times, because there are similar megalithic structures of inexplicable origin elsewhere on the planet.
Right, because it's a piece of what you've seen elsewhere. Okay.
It adds to the bigger picture.
Yeah, okay.
Our ancestors were all visited by the same teachers.
You know what? I respect that immensely, because I think that's the correct scientific way to go about things. You start with a supposition, and then put it to the reality test, put it to the real world, put it to the evidence. I want to become convinced by the data.
Well, if I have accomplished anything with you, I hope that you continue looking at other places and be like, you know, that Giorgio guy, he has a point.
You want me to be convinced?
Yes, exactly.
And that's a key point. You look me in the eye and you say, you know what, I am convinced that ancient astronauts visited this planet and sowed the seeds of what inspired people to build these things. I can't prove you wrong, okay? I can't. And I don't know anybody who can do that. So the book is still open.
Yes, and I hope you will read the next chapter.
You write it, I'll read it, okay? I'll read it.
Harvard University, February 2018. In a groundbreaking genetic study published in the journal Nature, Harvard researchers announce a stunning discovery about ancient human DNA. It reveals that immediately after Stonehenge was built, the people who built it, the ancient inhabitants of Britain, suddenly and almost totally vanished from the British Isles. They left behind virtually no DNA in the modern British population.
What the 2018 study suggests is that the genetic signature of the Neolithic inhabitants of the British Isles, it vanishes shortly after the period in which they built Stonehenge and is largely replaced by an entirely new human culture in a very short amount of time.
The Harvard study is an absolute bombshell. An entire civilization just disappears without a trace, vanishes into thin air. It's easily the most surprising and most shocking conclusion you can imagine.
The study used a revolutionary new technique that samples DNA from ancient human bones and then compares it to the DNA of modern people in the same place. Scientists then determine what percentage of the modern population is descended from the ancient group.
So the new genetic data are really providing an example of population replacement, in which the genetic markers that characterize one population is almost entirely replaced in a relatively short amount of time by the genetic signature that characterizes another population from a different part of the world.
The strange disappearance of the Stonehenge builders remains a profound historical mystery. Might it point to a deliberate cleansing of the human genetic line, as ancient astronaut theorists and the flood myths found worldwide suggest? Perhaps further evidence of this can be found with the recent discovery of a confounding genetic lineage that is proven nearly impossible to trace. Emory University, Atlanta, Georgia, 1998. Researchers analyzed DNA data collected from various Native American populations in an effort to trace back their ancestral descent through the Bering Strait. The lineages are categorized into 4 haplogroups, A, B, C, or D, each line representing a different migration off the Asian continent between 20 to 30,000 years ago. But what they also find is that a small portion of the native population falls completely outside any previously known genetic group. Scientists dub it the X lineage.
Among human haplogroups, one stands out, the X lineage, which is found in about 2.5% of some Native American groups, and also in a small population of Northern Europeans and the Middle East. And there is no connection between these groups. We couldn't understand why they're so different, these X haplogroups.
Isn't it amazing that you have a group of people, indigenous, we think, to this planet, and you really can't trace what their ancestry was? Scientists throw up their hands and they simply say, I don't know how this can be, because these people aren't somehow related to these people. How can this be?
While the source of this X lineage remains a mystery, some ancient astronaut theorists believe it might be connected to a lost race of people that were said to have existed throughout the world, including North America.
It's possible that this X lineage gene is related to the giants that were reported throughout the world. Starting in the mid-1800s in America, archaeologists began excavating skeletons of giants who were 7 to 8 feet tall in many cases.
In the 1800s, Smithsonian archaeologists unearthed dozens of oversized skeletons contained within the burial mounds of the ancient Adena Indian tribe, the highest concentration of which were found in the Kanawha Valley of West Virginia, an area known to researchers as the Valley of the Giants. Author and researcher William Henry is meeting up with a local Adena Indian researcher, Jason Jarrell, to have a look at one of these ancient earthworks.
This is the Creel Mound, and this mound was excavated by the Smithsonian Institution in November of 1883. The Smithsonian sank a circular shaft from the top of this mound down through the center to the bottom. Wow. And that's where they found an elaborate tomb. This structure contained 11 burials. 10 of these burials were arranged in a semicircular fashion around a central personage.
So you have 10 people around a central figure. What was significant about this central figure?
According to A.R. Sines, who assisted in the excavation of this mound, the central burial, when measured in the tomb, was 6'8"3/4. Now, the skull had been pulverized by the excavation, so a complete measurement wasn't possible. So in all likelihood, this individual was probably around 7 feet tall.
That's a giant.
It's a gigantic humanoid.
So we're saying the Smithsonian came here in 1883 and discovered a giant. That's correct. In fact, they discovered giants in many of the mounds here in Charleston. There were originally 50 burial mounds in this valley.
Wow.
And I've actually got some documentation here to show you.
Let's see.
This is the manuscript of the agent of the Smithsonian who excavated these mounds, and this represents his day-to-day journal of his excavations, including the one that's mentioned on this page, which is measured as 7 foot 6 inches in length.
Incredible. So wait a minute, this is a government worker who's out doing a job, excavating a mound, and he discovers giants.
Multiple gigantic skeletons, the ones in this valley being between 7 and 8 feet tall.
That is incredible. So why don't we all know about it? How come it's not in history books?
Well, the policy of denial of the discovery of gigantic human skeletons actually wasn't enacted until about 1920. Before that time period, the Smithsonian acknowledged these giants in their own reports.
Absolutely amazing. For years, I've been hearing stories, Native American legends about giants. It appears that we've unearthed evidence, proof of their existence here in West Virginia. But for whatever reason, that proof was suppressed. It probably has to do with the fact that it doesn't fit with our model of human evolution. We have to ask, is there an extraterrestrial connection?
We have to ask ourselves who these 7, 8 foot giants were. Were they somehow the vestiges of these giants of the Bible? It's a mystery that archaeologists have yet to solve. And part of the answer may be extraterrestrial DNA that's part of these giants.